You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey everybody, this week's guest is Chris Number 2, bassist and co-vocalist for the Pittsburgh punk rock legends Anti-Flag. Known these guys for ages, great band, great people. Chris picked a Brandenburg Gate to discuss today, an amazing song. He talked about being so far away from home in Germany and knowing that his relationship back at home was ending. The Brandenburg Gate being a metaphor. When you're sad, you find a connection in everything. How Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine told them to take the woes out of the song, but they kept them anyway. Good move, guys. He talked about how he was unavailable during the making of the album American Spring because he was going through a bad breakup. The band was what ruined everything he loved in his mind. How Rick Rubin wanted to sign Anti-Flag, which allowed them to pretty much handwrite their major label deal because if Rick was interested in the band, everyone wanted them. But they ended up going with RCA. And I also touched on how I was completely intimidated about touring with Anti-Flag for the first time way back in 2000. I had seen pictures of them in magazines, and they looked like these tough Pittsburgh punks. I'm like, these guys are going to kick our ass. But they didn't. We had an amazing tour with them, and 20 plus years later, we're still great friends. So for all this and much more, stay tuned.
Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast.
Met you guys on a tour in 2000. It was us, you guys, Newfound Glory, and the Teen Idols.
Yeah.
And I had certainly heard of you guys, but this is kind of 2000. Yeah, the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is today. I didn't know much about you, but I had seen a few pictures in some magazines, and I'm like, oh man, our manager, remember her calling us, and she was like, so we're thinking about getting, Anti-Flag on the bill. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know those guys, man. They're like tough. They're like tough, like Pittsburgh punks. They're like straight edge. They're gonna kick our ass,
Yeah.
And you guys just looked, menacing in your photos back then. And you guys show up in Atlanta, and I remember you guys pull up in your van and you get out, and I'm like, well, they're not as big as I thought they were. Okay, that's good. And then I think it was a day or two in, I look over, I'm playing, and there you are doing the worm across our stage. And I'm like, this is amazing. And like, we broke down that whole tour, and I was young still. I was, so I think on that tour 24, and I was like thinking, straight edge people aren't any fun. You guys were like the most fun people on the whole tour.
Yeah. We deal with that to this day, where we will go into situations and people have such a preconceived notion of that, oh my God, if I eat a plate of bacon near them, they're going to lose their minds on me. And, we're fun.
You guys are one of the most fun bands ever. I have nothing but great things to say. I love you guys. You know that. But it was just great because, your preconceived notions, and touring was still somewhat new then, at least package tours for us.
Yeah. And also just like there was, we were dealing with the scene's growing pains at that moment where
absolutely
they were through the roof for everybody. So we had to manage a lot of shit on that tour. Like us and Newfound Glory were flip-flopping. They were signing to a major and going to go on to be what they ended up being. And, we had been kind of slugging it out and, finally had said, we were going to tell people that we were worth something and not just be basement dwellers. So, we had a band decision that we were going to take it seriously. And that was one of the, that was an affirming tour for us, just in the sense that, we had come off this Dropkick Murphys tour that was really hard and not what we had hoped it to be. And then from that, we got the Rage Against the Machine tour, which, was
amazing.
Life changing. Yeah. I mean, just the things that we learned there. And then it was like, yo, go back to this same type of level that we were doing with Dropkick back then. But you guys were even bigger than them at that time. So we had no idea. We were just trying to navigate all of the places we were playing were new to us. I love thinking about that tour and thinking about you guys taking the lava lamp from the rave in Milwaukee because you sold it out, and it's just like thinking like yeah, if we sell this out, we're taking this lava lamp. And I was just like, dude, that is the most baller shit of all time. And we were there not too long ago, and I was like, I wonder if those guys still have that lava lamp.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm staring at right now in the corner. I dug it up in my last move when I moved 2 years ago, and the first show on our tour, it was supposed to be a couple weeks ago. We were starting a tour with Lagwagon and Masked Intruder. It was going to start at the Rave in Milwaukee. It's funny you mentioned that. I, in my drunken idiocy back in the late 90s, in the bathroom backstage, remember they had all those like tarps up and stuff, and all those curtains back there. I stole a picture off the wall of Eddie Van Halen and Sammy Hagar. And a framed picture. I don't know why. I was never a thief. I don't know why the fuck I stole it. So anyways, I'm taking that son of a bitch back, and I'm hanging it back in the same spot I took
That's so great. Yeah, I mean, and it's like none of it was, malicious rock star,
No,
it was like literally when the promoter, I was back there with you guys when the promoter came down, and they're like, I think there's like 200 tickets left. And it was Buddy or you who was like, if we sell this show out, I'm taking that lamp. And he was like, be my guest. That lamp is yours. You've earned it. And sure enough, the show sold out. And I remember watching you guys from the floor, and that floor bounces because it's just like floating.
Oh, yeah.
And I was forever inspired by it. I mean, you were 24. I was 18.
I think you were like 19 or yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say about that tour, and we'll move on, is it was just amazing. It was like the perfect storm, Teen Idols had a buzz. You guys in New Found Glory just had this groundswell. It was just this thing. And we probably could have done two nights in every city. There was people, there was lines around the door waiting to get in. And just the energy from that, I'll never forget it. So when I reached out to Chris recently, he had, I said, I want to pick a song. That's kind of the theme of the podcast. And you came back at me with two songs. This Is the End, which I love, and Brandenburg Gate, which we ended up going with. And I love this song for so many reasons. The number one reason is that I love that you wrote it not earlier in your career, in the sense that, like, when you write your early stuff, your old stuff's the best crap. We always hear that. As a band, the longer you get. This was a song written in 2015 that it's one of your biggest songs. It's so good. I get chills thinking about just standing on the side of the stage and watching you, especially in Europe. People go ape shit when you play this song. So let's start at the beginning. 2015, you guys, I think we're done with RCA then. You were going to put this out on Spine Farm, your first release. Was this song written prior to this, or was it written specifically for that record?
So that whole American Spring record was pretty trepidatious for us. So we did two records on the major, and because of that Less Than Jake tour, we were very popular. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, about a year before that record, though, we did tour together again on the Fat Tour in 2013.
Yeah. So we did two records on the major, and we were in a fortunate position where we had a lot of bargaining chips. The greatest bargaining chip we had when we signed to the major was that Rick Rubin wanted to sign us to American, and that allowed us to pretty much hand write our major label deal. And
we never knew that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So it was a big deal. And I mean, especially at that time, if he wanted to invest in something or sign it or work on it, every worm came out of the woodwork.
Oh God, yeah.
And so that's how we ended up with RCA, because they let us write our own contract. And
Good for you.
so we did a 2-record deal on RCA, and it was done. And kind of a knee-jerk reaction to that was the 2 records we put out on side 1. And they were recorded with money that we took from RCA to build our own studio. We didn't want a producer. We didn't, we wanted to go back to it just being the 4 of us. And that's kind of how it goes when you are put through the ringer of having a lot of people involved in your art. The antithesis of that is to, we didn't demo anything. We just shout out the songs. And those 2 records sound like it. You know what I mean? And
they're the reactionary records. That's what
exactly.
they are.
Yeah. And so American Spring was interesting in the sense that it was us then reflecting on both of those experiments and taking the best out of them. And so what we ended up doing was going back to LA to make a record with a producer, but we wanted to work with a producer who was younger than us. That was like a prerequisite to the whole thing, that we no longer wanted to chase.
This is Kenny Carkeet, correct?
Yeah. So this is Kenny. We no longer wanted to chase, like legends. and it's okay that a lot of people make records with older folks, but what we found was we knew how to write Anti-Flag songs. What we were looking for was ways to make them fit within the lexicon of today. And so that's where Kenny comes in. That's a
tricky art.
yeah, because I love Anti-Flag records. I want to make songs that sound like us, but I also want, when they're on a playlist or when they're on, sitting alongside whatever is happening right now, I want them to sonically stand up and not sound dated as well. So
absolutely.
So that's kind of where Kenny came from. He was, co-wrote that song Sail by AWOL Nation. He was very on the nose of what was happening within the mainstream at that time. But also was a kid from Florida who grew up on Less Than Jake and Anti-Flag and loved punk rock. So he was almost more cognizant of being offensive to our audience than we were, which is, I think something you should do, like I think legacy is important. And I think that, I love, Saves the Day is one of my favorite modern rock bands because they change their sound every record. But that's challenging for your audience. And
it's definitely a gamble. I've seen a lot of bands fail at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we internally go through a lot of discussions about that, where Justin really loves to hold on to the structures that were true to the band. I am certainly more open to musical exploration because I think that the politics are the driving force of the band, not necessarily the sonics. So those are, if we ever have heated discussions as a band, that's that. That's what it is.
Well, I can relate. We have the same ones. I mean, it's a very thin line that you're talking about. It's either we sound like we used to, and they sound like they used to. They're just cranking out the same old shit, or you do something new and they've changed. They suck.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. And and those are tough roads to navigate. And so getting into Brandenburg Gate. What I've also found, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, is that through your history as a band, you will have, if you are a collaborative effort, which Anti-Flag is, you will have moments when band members are available and unavailable. And so,
sure. For a number of reasons.
And so going into American Spring, I was particularly unavailable. I had a relationship end that I didn't think would ever end. And those guys told me to get ready to write a record. And I was like, why would I do this? This is the thing that wrecked everything that I had that I loved. I'm not going, I don't see the value in it. And
right.
Especially if we were going to continue down or stay on the treadmill that we were on, which was, put out a record on side one, do a Warped Tour, keep throwing, just it was an endless escalator, and it
diminishing returns too.
Yeah, and it felt like, Xerox copies that were getting worse and worse each time. And so I distinctly remember saying, like, unless we are willing to invest in ourselves and have this be a tentpole record that we reflect back on, I don't want to do this. And so we talked about how that could be done, and what we settled on was, let's not have a record label. Let's go and make the record ourselves. I was friends with Kenny because my other band, White Wives, had done some touring with AWOL Nation, and I was like, he is so smart. He's like fresh out of Pro Tools High, where like anything you want to do, he can do. And he's a master of pitch and all of these things that I felt like we really needed to up our game. And so then the onus was on us to write the songs, because we had the way we were going to document it all planned, and we were going to, do that Jimmy World model of record the record, pitch it to the labels. It will be so undeniable, someone will want to invest in it. And ultimately that's what happened. And
well, I mean, and let me just say, it's funny maybe it wouldn't have mattered so much at this time, because the whole sellout thing, I kind of had passed, and kids nowadays don't give a shit about what label you're on. They just don't care anymore. But that was such a huge thing back when we were first cutting our teeth, your band and our band. But like, if this record would have come out on RCA, especially a song like Brandenburg Gate's one of the poppiest songs you guys have ever written. The production, I mean, it's so clean and crisp. I love it. But it's like, when you think of where you guys came from, this was definitely a step in another direction, but it still retained who you guys were.
It's funny, and I'll be a bit more open and vulnerable with you than I am with most people, because I know and love you, and this feels like no one else is going to hear it but you.
This is great stuff. I'm transparent when it comes to my songs too, because I have nothing to hide with them.
Yeah, but we refer to it as selling the used car, because a band, we're called Anti-Flag. They're never going to play us on the radio. We took This Is the End to radio and the Press Corps to radio, two of our biggest songs. We took Brandenburg Gate to radio. We took American Attraction to radio. We took the newest single off the last record, The Disease, was the one where I find like they wanted to spend the money again. And I just said, what are you doing? Literally, it comes across the desk and people go, look, we try to sell beer and ads for strip clubs. It's not, like, this is not the demographic for something called Anti-Flag. And so finally we were able to get them to not waste money on, I get it, where we write catchy songs, but like, you don't need the radio in 2020 the way you did in 2000 or 94 or whatever. It'd be great if it happened, but it's not a precursor for success or failure.
And maybe that didn't come into play with your thinking because of what you just said. But my question, I remember the first time I heard this, I heard it live. I hadn't heard the recorded track. I heard the recorded track after I heard you guys play it. And I didn't know what you were saying in the chorus. I just knew it was the catchiest damn thing I ever heard. I mean, seriously, it's one of the, I'm not blowing smoke, man. This is one of the greatest punk rock songs. Just everything about it. It's, it has Tim Armstrong on it, which it has kind of a rancid feel with the guitars and the production. I mean, if this song was on Out Come the Wolves, it would have been a hit for them. I'm convinced. Were you at all worried about the lyric? Again, I didn't know what you were saying in the chorus, and I had to figure it out. It's such a poppy, such a catchy, great song. Were you worried about putting out a lyric that was so abstract, Brandenburg Gate as the hook? Did that come into play? Did you think of that or not? No, because to be honest, again, I wasn't thinking in terms of relatability. So the song itself
is born out of, I was in Berlin. Have you ever been to the Michelberger Hotel?
I have not.
Okay. It's like, it's one of our go-to spots.
Okay.
It's kind of a hipster vibe now, but like it's right in Kreuzberg and you could walk to everything. So that's where we stay. And, I was at the Michelberger Hotel, and, this was kind of the moment when I realized that something was detrimentally wrong with my relationship.
Oh.
And, I was ready to fly home and quit. We were on tour with Billy Talent playing arenas across Germany. And I was like, fuck this. I'm done. Something's gone wrong. And
it's a brutal feeling. 4,000 miles away from, I've been there. That's horrible.
Yeah. It was the worst. And subsequently I've been to this place a couple times now, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is, I'm brought back to that moment every time I'm there. But one of the things that whenever I was told by my partner at the time not to come home, I stayed, and the next day everybody tried to cheer me up, and they said, we're going to walk to the Brandenburg Gate. And so I remember doing all this stuff, and I started writing the song, and that's where the lyric kind of came from.
Man, I got goosebumps, man. That's cool.
And it just being this metaphor for, because obviously the history of what's going on in that part of the world. And sure. when you are sad, you will find connection in everything. And that's just where I was able to put my, and like on that tour, while my life was kind of falling apart, we did so many heavy things. We went to Dachau, and we, actually did a heavy tour of Brandenburg Gate. And so, when you talk about that lyric, one of the funniest instances is we had a guy who was working promo for us. And he started with us during the Side One records in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. And we brought him along when we signed to Spine Farm. And I remember playing him the song Brandenburg Gate, and he was like, this isn't going to work here. Nobody calls it the Brandenburg Gate. You're using its English translation. I don't think this is going to, I don't know why you guys want this to be a focal track of the record. Here are these other songs that I like better that I think will work with the German punks, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting.
And we were in Hamburg, and we played it for the first time ever that night, and people lost their minds during it. Didn't matter what we were saying, because the hook was the hook. And I remember he was on stage, and I turned around and looked at him in the last chorus, and he just gave me a shoulder shrug like, okay, let's go. And
I was wrong.
Yeah. And so that was one of the few times we got to be vindicated by, sticking to what we believed in the time. And,
the song just, before it gets to the first chorus, and the band drops out, and it's just just the vocal, which is just so cool. And then of course it has the whoa-wohs at the end, and then it has the whole snare build up in the end when the audience just blows up. And so I'm looking at the lyrics here, and gosh, like I said, I got goosebumps a minute ago, and it's such a cool story, because you guys are a political punk band. To me, there was political overtones to this. This is a love song about a broken heart. I mean, I lost my baby to a foreign war. She was cut down in the gunfire of the Western world. She was living in sin. I was living a lie. She was caught up in the glimmer of a rich man's eye. I mean, it's, I could tell what that's about, man. There's some pain there.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, because you're right. We don't do love songs. And so there became this discussion about the lyrics on what we could change to create the political connection, but also keep my personal connection to writing it. And so, it turned into this really Billy Bragg socialist anthem, but also about your heart being broken. And so
that's great.
It ends up
even more now.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. Yeah. So I I do know that, like, there are a couple cool things that you mentioned in it. The Tim Armstrong thing happened because we were just wanted a guest on the record, and we played Rockfest in Montebello, and Tim was doing his radio show from there. And he said to me, he was like, "Hey man, I know you don't have a label right now. I'd love to, talk about doing some stuff." And I was like, "Well, we're writing a record and we're going to record in LA. I would love to just send you some songs and see what you think about them." At this time, like, we were kind of like, maybe we'll sign to Hellcat. That'd be awesome. And, and then I didn't really hear from him for a while, and we went and we made the record and everything was pretty much wrapped up, and he just reached out again. And so I was like, "Well, listen, we're pretty much done, and we've had labels coming in and out to hear it. We've kind of settled on one, and we knew we were going to end up on Spine Farm. And but I was like, I would love for you to sing on this song because it's got this lyric, 'She was searching for salvation.'" And I was like, how cool would it be to hear Tim Armstrong sing the word salvation on our album?
Yeah, he's got a song named that. Yeah,
exactly. And so we brought him in and he sang, and it wasn't going very well. It was a little bit high for his register these days. And so he started doing, Tim's got like two go-to voices. One that and you love, and then the one where he goes low and it's like, oh, that's not as much.
Right. That's when they bury it, and that's when Lars is put up in the mix.
Yeah. And so he started going to that.
I love you, Tim.
I know. I love him so much. But he started going to that lower range, and, he was our guest. We didn't want to offend him.
Sure.
And sure enough, in a moment of pure luck and one could only assume is fate, the San Francisco Giants are on TV and they win the World Series while he's doing his vocal takes. He leaves the booth to watch them win, comes in with the biggest smile on his face, and that is, honest to God, the take that is on the record is right after the Giants won the World Series.
She was searching for salvation in the day you buy. I was finding all the reasons to give up on life. If you love something and give it away, no, you can't come back unless you're free.
I mean, you couldn't have scripted it better. So,
that's funny.
But yeah, I mean, it was everything about him was so cool. Like, I had printed out the lyrics, but he didn't want that. He hand wrote them himself so that he was more familiar. It was really great. He came to us to record it. He didn't just send us a vocal. It was all really great. And then the woes and the snare drum at the end, Tom Morello told us to edit that part out, but I liked it, so I kept it.
He did.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of the song.
Hey, man.
I mean, the guy, I value his opinion. He sold a gazillion more records than I have. How could you cut out the best part of the song?
I know. So it was actually a bit longer, so we trimmed it down to appease him a bit. But those two mentions that you have interesting backstories. So I thought I would touch on them.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Who's wrong, Chris DeMakes or Tom Morello? So now you got the track, you recorded it, and now just take me back to, like, you're in the studio, and finally the bass is on there, the last vocals on there, and you're for real. You're hearing kind of all the faders come up, and you're hearing the track come back at you this way and hit you in the ears. What are you thinking? Was it like, wow, this is really good, or was it just another album track at that point to you?
So for me personally, I had heard I had heard what you hear now was playing in my head from minute one.
Interesting.
And so I was really, really sure of the song and really sure of the melody. The thing that we were chasing was the guitar lead for the turnarounds and how do we get from section to section. And we had a lot of like really simple melodic leads and none of it worked. And Justin in the 11th hour pulled out what's on the record, and that 100% saved the song.
Isn't that amazing how sometimes someone that, I don't know if he had anything to do with the writing of this, but that's happened in our band where the last minute someone will be like, hey, what about this? And it just totally took the song to another place. It breathed a life into it that just wasn't there prior to that.
Yeah. Well, and it was killing me because I had exhausted my mental capacity on, there's probably demos with 15 different. I mean, the section of the song I'm talking about is like 2 seconds long.
It's just that it's not that, but it's such an integral part of the song.
Yeah, it's that turnaround as soon as the song begins. That first 10 seconds, and I couldn't figure out what the melody was. A lot of them were mimicking the vocal melodies, and I didn't like that. And then, literally, it's just like a blues, a very rancidy bar riff, and it saved the song. So I'm very grateful that he didn't give up on it because we were at many stages where we could have.
So now the song's done. I mean, you've had it in your head and you're hearing it back, and it's just pretty much what you've had in your head all along. Was there any expectations? Were you like, holy shit, when our fans hear this, they're going to lose their mind? Or did you think it was going to, because I'm telling you, man, I out of all your songs, that one there's something about it. There's something special. I'm so glad that you picked it. I mean, when we did that deconstruction tour over in Europe, and there's something so nice because, in the early days of doing this, you could probably relate. We were all vying for the same piece of pie. We all wanted to be the biggest band we could be. We all wanted to sell records. We wanted to be successful, whatever that meant to each of us. And there was jealousies and this and that. And it was just so nice. I think deconstruction was what, 2017 we did that maybe?
Oh, you mean Punk and Drublick?
Was that the Punk and Drublick ones? I'm sorry. That's what it was. And I just remember sitting at this club it was like 2,000 people shoved into a space. You could probably fit 800 comfortably. And, the condensation is dripping off the walls, and I'm on the side of the stage watching you. And I was just so proud of my friends and just watching that audience. And again, I marveled at the fact this is a song these guys just put out a couple years ago. This isn't like their early stuff that, is tried and tested and people have, 15 years of memories attached to. This is a new track. I mean, that's why I was stoked you picked this song, because to me that's fascinating how we don't have Less Than Jake doesn't have a new song like that's connected. We don't. And that's not a knock against us. We're always searching for that.
Yeah. I actually had, maybe unsolicited, maybe you guys were talking around and I didn't know. But on that tour, JR, Aaron from Real Big Fish and yourself all at 3 separate times pulled me aside to talk about, because, we end the show with American Attraction, which is from 2017, Die for the Government, which is from 96, right. And Brandenburg Gate, which is from 2015. And so, the conversation was, hey, you have songs that aren't quote unquote classics that you're closing with. How did you do that? and
it's not like you guys got a huge machine of radio or a label behind you. What you've built, and I know your agent did a great job. Sean, who we used to work with, did a great job, and you guys have toured your asses off.
Yeah, it was really interesting to have that happened, that conversation with yourself and Aaron and JR kind of just separately was over breakfast with you. And I think like over dinner with Aaron, and just talking about performing new songs and having them connect. 'Cause it was something we didn't even recognize as being, I don't want to say special, but something that was happening in our world that was something others were struggling with. We just knew that, you know, we put out a handful of records, you know, 3 records total with Bright Lights of America, People Are the Gun, General Strike, where it didn't seem like anything was connecting on that level. And then something had changed with American Spring and American Fall, where people seemed way more open to the new songs and way more open to specifically like Brandenburg Gate and American Attraction in a way that they were on, you know, the Die for the Governments and This Is the End and Press Corps and
well, I think there's two things here. You're right. Kenny did a great job on the production. I think that this was a little bit easier for people that maybe don't like that harder punk edge to swallow, but yet it still retained who you guys were to where your fans are still going to love it. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. Because when I was watching the audience, it was obvious that probably most of these people had heard the song, because I can see them singing it, you know, and not just kind of mouthing. Some people just mouth along to try
watermelon. Yeah,
there you go. You know, but there's people singing it, so you know that they've heard it. But then there's also other people losing their shit just because it's one of those songs. We've all heard those songs that just live. You've never maybe seen the band even, and you see the song and you're like, this is electric. This performance is electric. And that's what that song does to me. Yeah, it's just undeniable. I'm super, super glad that you picked it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it was born out of a dark place, and sometimes I mentally go there when we play it. And so I think that impacts, that certainly impacts the performance element of it in how much you're invested in the song, which, as you know, people that find themselves at punk rock shows have pretty good bullshit detectors, and they can tell if you're faking it or phoning it in. And I think that was an important element of it too, that has driven my want for the song to connect. And, you know, what I've found more than anything is just, if we just bang our head against the wall and believe in something and present it in a way where that belief is palpable for people, they have a higher likelihood of believing in it as well.
All right. So lastly, Chris, here's your chance to let our listeners know what's going on with you. Time to, you know, plug anything that's going on personally in your world or with the band. Let us have it.
Yeah, man. We, much like everybody, are just kind of holed up in our houses. Pat's wife is an ER doctor, so we don't see her or him because she's around patients that have COVID. Wow. Justin's dad is 86, so he doesn't want to come in contact with anybody he doesn't have to. So we're really just kind of isolated. We have a Monday anti-flag call that happens weekly, and we just talk shit on each other for an hour and then go away.
Ours is Wednesday.
Okay, good. But yeah, man, we put out a record in January, so we're greatly looking forward to this all being over, when we can get out there and try to share it with people and see if there are any Brandenburg Gates hidden on 2020 Vision. We don't know yet. We've only played it for a handful of people. So
there you go. And you're also, you've entered into the custom songwriting world. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah. If you would like a custom song, you can write to me at chrisdosesongshop@gmail.com. But more than anything, I actually have like a pretty heavy list in front of me, so I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to get too many orders. But
good for you. It's good. It's good to be busy.
Yeah, but I do want to personally thank you, because whenever I started it, you called me and gave me sage-like advice. And we've been friends for a really long time, but you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to take time out of your day to be like, yo, these can be the pitfalls, these can be the successes. And so I'm grateful to call you my friend, but I did want to go on the record and let people know that you are as nice as you seem.
I appreciate that. No, and thanks for saying that. I wanted to share it with you. I've as I told you the other day on the phone, I've really enjoyed the connection with the fans. It's putting food on the table for my family in this downtime, but it's so much more than that. The connection's amazing, and the fans love it as well as you do. So I'm really glad you're having success with that. Congratulations.
Yeah, and the greatest takeaway for me personally has been just my songwriting has improved, because much like anything, you're putting in your hours, and you are, if I was building cabinets for people right now, because I've done so many, I'd be a pretty good cabinet maker. So I think that it's the same thing that's happening, and I'm hopeful that it'll translate into the rest of the art that I'm a part of creating.
Yeah, I definitely think I've gotten better as well. I can definitely attest, because I've been spending 8 hours in front of the computer, staring at a screen, playing guitar and singing every day for the last 6 months. It's done me wonders. I can completely relate to that. Well, hey, man, thank you so much for being on and giving me your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I also want to thank your producer for holding it down in Pittsburgh. It's a great town. It's a great town. You're welcome to come hang with us whenever you want to do it in person.
Chris Fafalios from the band Punchline. He's the hidden man behind the scenes. They're making all this happen. So thank you, Chris.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know, where each week I will preview a select band of my choice. If you'd like your band to be previewed on Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is submit your song and bio to bandyoumighttnotknow@gmail.com. Again, that's bandyoumighttnotknow, all one word, @gmail.com. All I ask for is a good quality recording of a song that you feel best represents your band. This week's featured band is Not Tonight and the Headaches from Lincolnshire in the UK. They're a 4-piece pop punk band consisting of Matt Snell, James Elliott, Rob 2, and Matt Cade. Their music is available on all the streaming platforms as well as Bandcamp. This track I'm about to play is from their second album, If You Were Real, You Do Your Own Stunts. And I love this song. Here's a snippet of Reasons to Smile.
'Cause I've been known to fail. 'Cause I am at the end of my rope with these things that wind me up. But I won't, don't give it up, 'cause you're the reason I smile.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
Well, that was a great episode, man. And I'm glad it took 12 episodes, but I'm glad you finally got a Pittsburgh guy on here.
Yeah, Pittsburgh represent.
Yeah, for sure.
I've known Chris and the guys, as I mentioned, for a long time, and just always fun. And he was such an engaging guest. He had a lot of great things to say about this song in particular.
It's hard not to like Chris, man. Always personable, always a great conversation that I have with that guy. I love seeing him in Pittsburgh. Him and I were both involved in a couple buddies of mine, Josh Bakaitis and Corey Muro, the drummer in Punchline, put on 2 years in a row. They did 1 year it was Tom Petty, and 1 year it was Paul McCartney, like tribute shows where people from all different genres of music in Pittsburgh get together. So you get put into bands with people you wouldn't normally play with, and you learn like 4 songs by that artist and play it. And it's always this like big fun thing, not only because you get to play songs, but also because you get to, I don't know, get some camaraderie with a bunch of people from your music scene. And I always love seeing Chris at those. It's always a lot of fun.
Which is funny too, because seeing him, I didn't see that, of course, but just thinking about him in that situation, he's such a personable, sweet guy, but you see him on stage and he just is so intense. He's up there screaming his head off, and you're like, you meet him off the stage, and that's why I said, like, the first time that I met those guys, I was intimidated because I was like, man, they're angry.
Dude, I love pictures. I don't know if you look at pictures of Chris on the internet, but he's always like, I'm friends with him on social networks. He's always like 50 feet in the air jumping off something. I'm like, dude, there's no way you jump that high. But somehow there's all these amazing pictures of him. I don't know. Maybe the dude is Michael Jordan and just can jump with his base. I always, I always envy those pictures where he looks like he's about to slam dunk. But yeah, dude, such a good episode because I loved hearing about the fact that this song is a popular anti-flag song. Anti-flag, like the most political band that you could, that would be like, other than Rage Against the Machine, I think Anti-Flag would be the first band that would come to my mind when you talk about political band. Yeah, Anti-Flag, Rage Against the Machine, Propaganda. And yet, when you're talking about this song, it's a love song.
Yeah.
That was so interesting, man. I know you thought that too.
I did, and just immediately, just the sentiment of it, the feeling, and then when he opened up about it and started, talking about everything, it was just like, wow, and it was so cool to be able to, have a love song, but that didn't directly reference the word love or your typical boy meets girl, I'm heartbroken type song. It's a very metaphorical with the whole lyric.
Right. Hey, and you and I were talking about this earlier today. It's crazy how love songs, whether it's love, happy, or heartbreak type songs, those are always going to be the most popular and relatable songs there are. I mean, before we were born and after we're gone, those are going to be the songs that people love and relate to the most. And I know, you and I and a lot of people we know, we're always trying to be like, no, there's too many of those songs out there. We got to write about other things, which is great too. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's going to be the Adele songs, and it's going to be the classic Beatles songs and songs like that are going to be the biggest songs ever. And it makes sense because we all go through that. And what better medicine is there for dealing with that than hearing someone sing a song that just expresses exactly how you feel?
Well, those songs will never not resonate. The quote unquote love song, they're always, and it's not even so much from a, love relationship, it could be inner family relationships, loss, grief,
right.
Friendships that are still great or went sour. It transcends all these different things. And as you said, it's just completely relatable.
Yeah, it's never a bad thing to write about. I think the key, this is a songwriting podcast, and I think the key to it is to find a new, or maybe clever is not the right word, but maybe it is, clever way to go about that and not just be generic about it. And good examples are like Death Cab. Ben Gibbard just writes the most creative ways to express that sort of thing. Whether it's, I brought up I Will Follow You Into the Dark is like this sad song, but so relatable. You're going to love this person until you die, but he finds like such cool ways to express that. And those are the songs that, people love when you find a new way to say it. And it's not just like, oh, you broke my heart. Oh, oh, I love you, not that Paul McCartney doesn't have that, that silly love song that's a pretty fun one. But, I guess once again, it could come down, you could say something simple as simple as I love you. And if you have the right melody and it's Paul McCartney singing it, that could be good too. I guess there's no rule book to it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of bands that do it great. One I had mentioned to you earlier was Alkaline Trio. They have a lot of that where you're like,
right.
Is this a love song? And it hits me like a love song. And whether it is or not, it achieves what we're talking about. It just tugs at your heartstrings. And, that I don't think, like you said, before we're born, after we're gone,
Yeah.
that's ever going to go away. You know, it's just, and to your initial point, the fact that Anti-Flag was able to pull that off, because that's the last type of song you'd think that you would get from them.
Right. Hey, and you know what? It's cool too. I feel like we've had guests talk about this, but it's cool when a song is a love song, but it doesn't necessarily come across that way, or you could interpret it. I think it was Jen Pop. I think Jen Pop on her song.
Yeah, I was going to say Notre Dame's a great example, you know.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, is this a love song? Because I can look at it that way. It reminds me, dude, it reminds me of, you know, all those Christian bands that like have the songs that like, you're like, is this about Jesus or is this a love song? I don't know if you've heard those kind of songs, but there's like all these like Christian punk bands that do that. And I'm always just like, what are you doing? Are you talking about Jesus, or you know, it's just like this funny line.
Well, we also touched on this with Tim from Rise Against with Savior. You know, was, you know, I had mentioned to him that, you know, they're another one that kind of, whether fairly or not, you know, because he said it's kind of a thorn in his side. They've kind of got labeled as a political punk band, and you know, you could read those lyrics, and once I really started reading them, like, wait, is this a love song? And he was like, well, right. You know,
right? Oh yeah. I forgot about Tim. Yeah, that's very, oh man, dude, when people come on this podcast, they want to talk about the love songs, man. They want to get deep a little bit.
We bring out the love here on Chris DeMakes a Podcast.
I think, you're joking, but I think it might be true. Hey, another thing that I thought was really cool on Chris's episode now was, you know, hearing him talk about working with a producer. I thought it was really interesting. He said, like, yeah, we know how to write Anti-Flag songs. We know how to produce ourselves, but we need that outside perspective to, you know, I guess he more or less meant it, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but more or less saying like to stay relevant, to not sound dated, to not necessarily that Anti-Flag wants to sound like what's on the radio or what's popular, but you have to keep up with, maybe sonically, I guess is the way to put it. You want your song to sound like yourself, but also as powerful as it can be. And powerful doesn't mean loud or thrashy necessarily. You could mean that if you're a country singer, and you could be writing a ballad as a country singer. I think powerful is always a good thing. I don't care if you're an indie rock band or you're a country singer singing a ballad. It doesn't matter. You want your song to come across powerful. And that's what I took away from what he meant when they worked.
Yeah, I knew exactly, you know, what Chris was going for there. You know, it's just about pushing those boundaries of your band, pushing the envelope. You know, continuing to want to move forward, and still be Anti-Flag, but not have the sound, the production, I guess, sound dated, so to speak. And he, you know, had touched on, you know, they left RCA, they made a couple records on their own. And, you know, he had just said, look, I want another perspective. I'd like to have somebody else come in that isn't as emotionally attached to these songs as we are, and is able to look at them outside of the glass objectively and give their thoughts. And that's such a, I hate using the word, it's such a mature thing to do as a band, to be able to let your guard down and say, you know what, I want these songs to be as best as they can. And it may behoove us to have, you know, someone outside of the band, you know, take us there.
Right. And, you know, I heard you talk about this before on the podcast, and I know I had the same experience, is like thinking back to before you ever worked with a producer and what you thought a producer did before you actually worked with one. It's amazing to get that outside perspective, and how far that can take your song that you maybe already thought was so great. Like, oh, you know, what's a producer going to do? I remember thinking, before I knew, you know, when I was young and before I knew what a producer did, I remember thinking that a producer was just what basically is an engineer. I thought it was just the guy who pressed the buttons and mic'd the drums and stuff, and didn't realize that it, like, you know, and we've all worked with different producers. There are some producers who will sit down at a drum set. You know, there's some producers who don't even touch the computer. There's some producers I've worked with that just like will talk to you about the big picture of the song. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go about producing. But when you work with a good producer, it takes your songs to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I've always equated it to, it's like hiring a personal trainer, so to speak. It's like you could go work out and do physical therapy or whatever on your own, and then you have someone else come in and go, yeah, those first 2 exercises you do, you should do them at the end because of this. And you're like, oh, and all of a sudden you just get stronger, you get better, quicker. Same thing as a producer. Producer will come in and just see things that you didn't see, be like, hey, that guitar lick you do at the top there, like that should be in the bridge. And you're like, what? You're like, yeah, that'll fit over the bridge chords. It's awesome. It should come back in there. And you're like, whoa. And then you do it and you're like, it's something you never would have thought of. And it completely elevated the song at that point.
Right. Hey, something I know that you and I talk about a whole lot is like, okay, we're dudes with a lot of experience in, being in bands and songwriting and things like that. And now it's bands and artists that, maybe are newer or haven't been around as much or haven't worked with a producer. You and I can listen to songs. We've talked about several of these type of songs where it's like, we'll both simultaneously be like, oh man, that song needs a chorus. That song is good, except what they think is the chorus is not a chorus. It's like we have this same wavelength, or, little things like that. Or it could be something like, this song needs to go somewhere else. This song is too linear and streamlined, and you need that moment of a breath in the song or something like that. Or this band went way too long on the intro. Like, why is there a 45-second instrumental intro to this song that doesn't need it? You pick up things along the way from producers and from learning about things that then you look back at bands that remind you of yourself 20 years ago, and you're like, oh, I wish someone would tell them to do this.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads into how you've been offering consultations with artists and bands and things like that, and I think that's a really great thing to be able to share that insight with people and be like, oh, to take a song to that next level is really cool.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, a lot of producers, they're glorified babysitters. They come in early in the project, they do the pre-production, they're there from the synthesis of the songs, and that's never been my thing. I like to get a song in the 11th hour and take it over the top. I feel that's one of my strengths. And I've been doing a lot of live one-on-one video consultations lately, thanks to everyone that's reached out. It's great. It could be anything music business related, songwriting collaborations. But we'll sit across on video, and you'll bring a song. Actually, I have people email me the song ahead of time. I'll get to listening to it. I'll figure out the chord progression. Lyrically, I'll break it down, and we just sit across from each other and we go through the song with a fine-tooth comb. And I've had nothing but positive things so far from everyone I've worked with. It's been great. So if you'd like more information about that, write me at chrisdemakes@gmail.com. I'd love to work with you. And again, this could be anything music business related for your band, with gigs to social media, etc. And still doing the custom songs. Chris and I are also offering custom songs in animation. Yes, we'll put your business jingle, something for your family. We'll do videos for your band. Again, write us at chrisdemakes@gmail.com for more information about that. And I think that's about it, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, this has been a really great episode, man. I think people are really going to enjoy this. Anti-Flag's a great band, and Chris number 2, such a good dude. And I'm glad that we had him on. And, I think, when you listen to, it's funny when you listen to somebody from a band and they're a super cool guy like Chris is, it makes you like the band even that much more. I find that like sometimes you'll listen to an artist and maybe they come off a little pretentious or something, and then your opinion of them, no matter how much you like their music, your opinion like changes slightly to the negative. But with Chris, I feel like, it's all good. It's a positive experience always.
Yep, can't say enough good things about those guys. And do us a favor, give us a follow, join the Chris DeMakes a Podcast Facebook group. We'd love to have you be a part, and we'll see you next week.
Ready for a head-bangingly good time? Dive into the world of heavy metal with the Brutally Delicious podcast. Here, we don't just talk music. We welcome you into our heavy metal family. Join us for candid chats with legends and rising stars. We go beyond the typical interviews, exploring raw emotions and the life-altering impact of heavy metal. So whether you're a diehard metalhead or just curious, join our family and let the headbanging begin with the Brutally Delicious podcast.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.